a review of the pivotal developments of our own epoch. With these thoughts in mind, let us review some of the most important cultural, scientific, and spiritual developments of our own time during the present conjunction of the winter solstice sun with the galactic equator. The exact conjunction was calculated by the Maya to fall in the year 2012 AD. Recognizing an orb of 15 degrees, the exceptionally pivotal era we are living in thus spans the years 938 to 3086 AD. As we have seen, the beginning of this period coincides closely with the first use of gunpowder in warfare in 904 AD. Though just outside the 15-degree orb of the conjunction, it falls well within the wider penumbral orb of 20 degrees. This began a more lethal phase of a worldwide arms race that continues to this day. 1206, onset of the Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous empire in human history and second largest in size, which reached its greatest height around 1300 AD. Rounding out the 5 largest empires in history includes the largest, the British Empire, which reached the height of its geographical extent in 1920. The third largest, the Russian Empire, with its pinnacle occurring in 1895. The fourth largest, the Qing Dynasty in China, whose largest extent was reached in 1790, and the fifth largest, the Spanish Empire, with its height in 1810. 1298 AD, invention in China of the first movable-type printing press, a discovery which would eventually enable widespread dissemination of knowledge and information across the planet. 1492, beginning of the era of mass European and other Old World migrations to the New World. 1743, Benjamin Franklin begins his research and experiments with electricity. 1760 to 1800, onset of the Industrial Revolution in England. The Industrial Revolution brought both material blessings and complex problems, dramatically amplifying the ecological footprint of humanity on the Earth's fragile ecosystems. 1792, Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Woman calls for women and men to receive equal educations. This was a powerful early event in the modern feminist movement. 1804, human population on planet Earth reaches 1 billion. 1825, the first freight railroad, the Stockton and Darlington, is built in England. 5 years later, the first passenger railroad opens, the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, beginning the era of rapid long-distance travel, first throughout the Northern Hemisphere and then the world. 1848, the Seneca Falls Convention in July that year in New York, organized by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, is the first convention for women's rights held in the United States. It is part of an inexorable rebalancing in our time of the feminine and masculine principles within the human psyche and human civilization. Though now considered controversial for excluding African American women and poor women, the event is still seen as a breakthrough moment in the rebirth of women's rights and equality. 1882, Nicola Tesla develops the alternating current in electricity. 1900, Freud publishes The Interpretation of Dreams, a seminal step in the origin of psychoanalysis and the coming era of deep psychospiritual self-exploration. 1903, first successful flight of a self-propelled, heavier-than-air aircraft at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, by the Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur. 1914 to 1918, World War I shatters the modern human faith in science and reason. 1916, the term collective unconscious first appears in C.G. Jung's essay, The Structure of the Unconscious. Going far deeper than Freud's idea of a personal unconscious teeming with repressed sexual and aggressive feelings, Jung understands that there is a collective unconscious which encompasses the soul of all humanity. 1938, November, synthesis of LSD-25 by chemist Albert Hofmann at the Sandoz Laboratories in Basel, Switzerland. This occurs through his study of the properties of the ergot fungus and the Mediterranean squill plant, during searches for a new respiratory and circulatory stimulant. The psychedelic properties of LSD-25 will not be realized until April 1943 during his famous bicycle ride. 1938, December, nuclear fission of uranium discovered in a lab in Berlin, Germany. The chemists and physicists involved in this discovery make this ominous breakthrough after years of seminal collaboration with Austrian physicist Lise Meitner, who must take refuge in Sweden just before the discovery because of her Jewish heritage. 1939 to 1945, World War II and the Holocaust. The Holocaust is one of the worst of dozens of horrific mass genocides and civilian casualty events of the 20th century. 1945, 2 atomic bombs detonated over Japan. 1948, the United Nations adopts the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, officially abolishing slavery around the world, an important threshold in the recognition of racial equality and the unity of all humanity. Slavery was abolished in many European countries and colonies, beginning with a surge in the late 18th century, occurring in the United States in 1865. However, it continues to persist in many parts of the world, primarily in Africa, Asia, and Eastern Europe. 1950, beginning of the golden age in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. 1957, launch of Sputnik, the first human-made satellite. 1968, the birth of transpersonal psychology in Menlo Park, California, during a series of meetings between Abraham Maslow, Stanislav Grof, Anthony Sudich, and others. The field of transpersonal psychology reflects the emergence in the collective psyche of a more universal, all-encompassing, and all-inclusive vision of spirituality, and a recognition of the importance of transcendent unitive experiences for human happiness and well-being. 1969, Apollo 11, the first human landing on the moon. 1975, Grof publishes Realms of the Human Unconscious. 1983, early birth of the Internet with rapid spread beginning around 1995. 1986, Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, or MAPS, founded by Rick Doblin. 1990 to 2003, mapping of the genome sequence. 1998, Grof publishes The Cosmic Game, considered by some to be the book of the coming millennium. 2006, Tarnas Cosmos and Psyche introduces the final crucial piece of the emerging holotropic worldview, an understanding of the world which returns soul and consciousness to the cosmos itself. His first book, The Passion of the Western Mind, 1991, concludes with these words: "Today we are experiencing something that looks very much like the death of modern man, indeed that looks very much like the death of Western man. Perhaps the end of man himself is at hand, but man is not a goal. Man is something that must be overcome and fulfilled in the embrace of the feminine." Circa 2012, Golden Age in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy resumes. 2020, Joseph Biden and Kamala Harris defeat Donald Trump and Mike Pence in the U.S. election by a margin of over 7 million votes, 81.2 million to 74.2 million, which is 51.3% to 46.8% of the popular vote. 2020 to 2021, the alarming aftermath of Trump's presidency as he clings to office and attempts to subvert the transfer of power. United States democracy hangs by a thread. 2023, the level of carbon in the atmosphere reaches 424 parts per million, up from 280 parts per million in 1750, a level not seen since the Pliocene era 3 to 5 million years ago. The escalating effects of climate change, which already in the early stages include alarming forest fires and punishing droughts, catastrophic flooding, and destructive superstorms, continue to accelerate around the planet. Yet humanity still extracts 80% of its energy from the burning of fossil fuels and only 13.4% from renewable sources such as solar, wind, and geothermal. Many scientists calculate that as the Greenland and East Antarctic ice sheets melt, oceans could rise by as much as 60 feet or more by the middle of the next century. This will inundate 80% of the world's cities, which are near coastlines and home to hundreds of millions of people, and force them to migrate and compete for space inland. Nuclear proliferation continues to be an ongoing threat. Mass genocides, totalitarianism, toxic conspiracy theories, and the despoilment of our air, water, and soil do not paint a very optimistic picture of the future of humanity. The mass extinction of animal species is another ominous trend. This rapidly escalating process, known as the Holocene or Anthropocene extinction, has increased more than 1,000 times above the background rate since 1900. Driven by wanton aggression and overconsumption of the Earth's limited resources, it is estimated that of the approximately 8 million species of animals and plants remaining in the world, around 1 million are now threatened with extinction. We are losing 150 to 200 species of animals, plants, and insects per day, which is up to 10% of the total remaining species per decade. 2022, the human population on the planet reaches 8 billion. Groff has commented that we have the resources for a good standard of living for every human being on the planet, if our species could only overcome its shadow qualities of greed and aggression. Our pressing evolutionary challenges. Despite the many blessings of our culture and technology, the present era is clearly one of extreme pressing challenges. Many have described this period as a race against time, between the destructive tendencies within us and our higher potentials to move toward growth and evolution. Our human proneness to greed and violence is creating ever-worsening societal and ecological problems, yet we also have the resources to overcome these challenges. Homo sapiens is being pressed through a critical yet dangerous crowning point in this birth process. Though on the edge of a major evolutionary leap, it is unknown whether our civilization will make the transition and survive. We have the technologies to shift to more sustainable ways of living, yet we persist with many of our old competitive, predatory, and self-destructive approaches. Will humanity be able to adapt? Many people realize that several things will need to occur for us to make the transition. We must wean ourselves from polluting fossil fuels and embrace more advanced, renewable forms of energy such as solar, wind, and geothermal. This transition is absolutely essential and will buy us time in the long run. Yet a deeper emotional transformation of humanity is also needed, a process which has already begun. The importance of deep self-exploration. Though our species has made many impressive intellectual advances, as Groff describes, we still carry the same emotions in our psyches that we did in the Stone Age. Our emotional development has not kept pace with our newly discovered mental capacities. I believe the act of turning some of our attention inward now to exploring the unresolved traumas from our personal history and the history of humanity is an important complement to whatever work we are pursuing in our outer lives. The discoveries of depth psychology can help us to face and overcome the deep emotional roots of our human fear, depression, greed, aggression, and other suicidal and self-defeating tendencies. The work of self-exploration is often compared to an inner archaeological quest. In the early stages, we can process unresolved traumas and unmet needs from our biographical lifetimes, from infancy through the present. Groff refers to this as the biographical layer of the unconscious. As self-exploration continues, we can face and resolve powerful leftover energies and emotions from our births and fear of death. This is the perinatal layer of the psyche. And finally, some of our most profound human problems have roots in even deeper realms of the unconscious, which Groff terms the transpersonal layers. Working through leftover trauma not only consumes its negative effects in our everyday lives, it also opens a pathway to more direct inner sources of satisfaction, so that we are not drawn toward futile compensations such as excessive striving for consumption, prestige, and power in the outer world. Inner healing also awakens our natural yearnings to pursue work that is meaningful and to cooperate in synergy with others to solve shared problems. Finally, holotropic and psychedelic experiences, when well integrated and supported, awaken a deep ecological sensitivity and high value placed on the life-supporting and enriching benefits of unspoiled nature. There is an urgent need for us to explore our unconscious psyches, just as our ancestors in pre-industrial and non-Western cultures have done for millennia. Many people undergoing this kind of inner work become convinced that it can be beneficial both to individuals and for the societies in which they live. The burgeoning interest in responsible forms of breathwork and psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy is a promising development in this renewal. As we have seen, the escalating challenges facing humanity suggest that we are in the grip of a titanic evolutionary birth labor, and every human being is participating in this process through their subjective emotional experience. Facing our own unconscious material can help in this process. We have come such a long way in the evolutionary journey. It would be a tragic waste to destroy our precious civilization now, when we are so close to reaching an omega point of awakening and threshold of maturity as a species. If we can move beyond our old patterns of greed and aggression in adequate numbers, we might be able to make the transition to a more peaceful and sustainable way of living on planet Earth.